Hey guys, tonight we stand on a battlefield where nothing moves. No bombs. No sirens. No boots crunching gravel. Just silence, dense, aching silence. A sky without drones. Streets without smoke. And yet, you don't quite breathe easy, do you? You're standing in the ruins of a town you don't remember the name of. Half the buildings are teeth snapped from a jaw. The other half lean like old men too proud to fall. Smoke rises in thin, uncertain ribbons like even it isn't sure if it should still be here. Somewhere far off, a crow caws once. You flinch. Old habits die hard. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're watching from and what time is it in your world right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past the skeleton of a market. Dates lie crushed in the dust. A single shoosh, child-sized, still pink, rests near a collapsed awning. You don't touch it. This is what a war looks like after the last missile falls. And yet, there's something different in the air. Not peace exactly. Not relief. Just the absence of screaming. For the first time in weeks, the air tastes like dust instead of fear. You pass a man sitting on the curb. He's sharpening a blade, not a weapon now, but a kitchen knife. Preparing for something as ordinary as food. He glances at you and doesn't speak. Just nods. A universal "we made it" that needs no translation. There's no marching today. No slogans. Just the wind brushing gently over broken glass. Historians still argue whether this moment, this lull, should count as a ceasefire, a truce, or simply an accident of exhaustion. But for the people here, it doesn't matter. They're not filing definitions. They're sweeping up ash, checking for water pressure, and counting how many walls are still standing. A grandmother pins laundry to a half-standing balcony. The clothesline flutters above burned-out cars. She hums. Not a lullaby, not a hymn. Just a hum to fill the space that bombs use to occupy. A boy, no older than 10, walks by clutching a sketchpad. His drawing? A house with a red roof and two smiling stick figures. It has no walls, but it has a tree. The tree is blooming. That's new. You remember when the war resumed, that April night when the sky looked like a microwave door, all sparks and flashes. You remember counting impacts like heartbeats. But now you count survivors. And somehow this feels stranger than the war. One man builds a cart out of scavenged wheels. Another tears down a wall not with rage, but to reuse the bricks. The enemy isn't each other anymore. It's the rain, the mold, the power outage, the price of rice. There are no parades, no banners, no victor speeches. Only people doing laundry on rooftops and hammering bent doors back into place. And yet every movement is hesitant. As if everyone's afraid the quiet might shatter. Like the wind might carry a whistle that's not just the breeze. You keep your ear tilted just in case. At the far edge of town, someone paints over graffiti. Not slogans or threats. Just the word, tomorrow. Scrawled in every language you recognize. And some you don't. They paint it gold. A radio flickers to life nearby. Crackles. Static. Then a voice, in related news, international observers click. No one wants commentary. They want silence or music or birdsong. There are no birds here yet. But maybe soon. Somewhere, someone whispers a prayer, not for revenge, not even for justice. Just for sleep. You take a breath and realize, so do they. You wake before dawn. Not because of sirens, but because of the silence. A kind of silence so complete it feels loud in your ears. For the first time in a long time, the absence of noise feels unfamiliar. You step out into the dim light. The sun hasn't quite committed to rising. And neither have the people. Across the courtyard, a soldier sits on a crate. He's not holding a rifle. It leans against the wall behind him, untouched. Instead, he's tying the laces on a pair of worn-out leather sandals, civilian sandals. You can hear the soft tug of the strap. He pauses as if surprised at the sound. He's not alone. On another rooftop, a woman once stationed at an anti-air battery now arranges herbs on a windowsill. Mint, thyme, basil. No one told her it was safe to grow things again, but no one stopped her either. Down the alley, someone claps twice. A door opens. A man appears, shirtless, in linen trousers, lifting a crate of pomegranates. He sets them on the table. No one says anything, but three others emerge with baskets. A market is forming, not by decree but by muscle memory. You remember how it felt to clutch your chest every time a car door slammed. How a flickering light meant run. But now, The clatter of crates sounds like music. It means someone is working, breathing, selling, living. A little girl walks up to the soldier. She stares at his boots, then up at his tired eyes. "Are you done?" she asks. He doesn't answer right away. Then he nods. "Good," she says, "because I want to play now." Historians still argue whether the war truly ended with diplomacy or just burned itself out. But in these streets, no one argues. No one cares if it was strategic withdrawal or mutual exhaustion. The war is over and the cleanup has begun. Not by politicians, but by people like this soldier with worn-out sandals, and this girl with chalk in her hands. On a sunlit wall, she draws a flower. It's crooked, lopsided. The petals are jagged. It's the most beautiful thing you've seen all day. Elsewhere, in Tel Aviv, a similar moment unfolds. A young man, drafted early in the war, now discharged, helps his mother repaint the shutters of their apartment. He hums a song banned during the conflict. No one stops him. His little brother throws a ball against the steps over and over. Their father, who hasn't spoken in weeks, smiles when it misses and hits a bucket. Meanwhile, the soldier's rifle remains untouched. Its metal catches the morning sun and does nothing with it. Back in the alleyway market, a fight nearly breaks out over a price tag. But it doesn't. They shake hands instead. Maybe because no one wants the sound of yelling. Not yet. Not again. That's the strange part, the restraint. As if everyone made a silent pact to be gentler. Or at least quieter. People still curse under their breath, but they don't scream anymore. And when a car backfires, for heads turn, but no one ducks. It's not utopia. There's still rubble. Still grief. Still scars where buildings and people used to be. But the difference is this: today, people are choosing to build, not bury. You pass by a garden that wasn't there before. A trench that once hid snipers now holds tomato vines. You hear a rooster crowing where a siren used to blare. The rooster wins. Inside a tiny cafe that somehow still stands, 3 ex-soldiers sip tea. They talk about football. And their mothers. And taxes. They don't mention battle formations or drone strikes. You walk on. The sandals you wear feel lighter than boots. The border doesn't look like a line anymore. Not today. It looks like a wound that stopped bleeding, raw yes, but scabbed over in places. On this morning, for the first time in years, something unimaginable happens. A convoy moves across it, and no one fires. It isn't a military convoy. There are no tanks, no flags. Just a rickety collection of aid trucks, ambulances, and 2 buses covered in tarps and dust. The tires crunch softly over dirt. People on both sides watch, quiet, holding their breath. You're there, standing with them. The air tastes of old diesel, road dust, and a hesitation that has lasted for generations. The first truck belongs to a medical NGO. Its side bears no country, only a faded red crescent and a cross awkwardly sharing the same space. A woman in a linen headscarf leans out and waves. Someone waves back. Just one man in the crowd, but it's enough to break the stillness. The second vehicle creaks as it passes. Inside are crates of water filters for drips and a single teddy bear strapped to the grill like a talisman. The children nearby inch closer, unsure whether to cheer or cry. One girl, maybe 7, pulls at her mother's sleeve. "Are they bringing peace?" she asks. The mother doesn't answer. Historians still argue whether these convoys marked a turning point or just a pause in a longer tragedy. Some claim it was all optics, gestures for the news cameras, not hearts. But if you were there, like you are now, you'd know the truth. The silence wasn't staged. It was sacred. On the other side of the line, in a town that used to be a red zone, volunteers unload supplies. Their movements are slow, not from fatigue, but from disbelief. Some haven't seen outsiders in years. They don't smile yet. Smiling feels dangerous. Like trusting the weather after a decade of drought. A man with a missing tooth and a clipboard calls out names. Not for detention. For medical kits. Food rations. Blankets. It feels like the opposite of a raid. One woman finds her brother's name on a delivery manifest. She doesn't know if he's alive. She presses the paper to her chest and closes her eyes. Hope, it seems, is heavier than fear. In a small tent near the edge of the aid station, a teenage boy sits cross-legged with a tablet. Yes, a tablet, cracked but working. He types rapidly in 2 languages. He's not gaming. He's translating. Mapping supplies. Tracking needs. The internet is spotty, but the hunger to rebuild isn't. You walk past the line of trucks, all different shapes and paint jobs, like a caravan from some medieval tapestry. You imagine a caption beneath it, and lo, the people crossed not to conquer, but to mend. Nearby, an Israeli medic kneels beside an Iranian child with a twisted ankle. He doesn't ask for thanks. He just wraps the bandage and pats the boy's shoulder. The boy doesn't flinch. A drone buzzes overhead. Everyone tenses for a second. But it doesn't fire. It just hovers. Then it turns and fades into the distance. Someone exhales, loud enough for others to hear. You notice something small. 2 guards, one from each side, leaning against opposite trees, not speaking, but not glaring either. Just standing, breathing the same dust. One of them offers the other a cigarette. It's refused. But again, that's enough. You move on. You see a mural freshly painted on the side of a bombed-out shop. A woman with outstretched arms holding a seedling in each hand. The text beneath it isn't Hebrew. It isn't Farsi. It's older. Just one word, shalom. Or maybe salam. Or maybe both. The news anchors look tired. Not from staying up late or dodging falling debris that was last month. No, this fatigue is different. It's the exhaustion of having nothing dramatic to report. No sirens. No leaks. Just logistics. Reconstruction updates. Economic speculation. A statement from the UN that uses the word encouraging 3 times in a single sentence. You watch from a cafe, the same one where just weeks ago people huddled underground. Now, sunlight slants in through soot-streaked windows, cutting across cups of tea, ink-stained newspapers, and the uneasy murmur of people rediscovering how to talk without whispering. You sip something warm and slightly bitter. Not because it's good, but because it's safe. A screen behind the counter flickers to life. A familiar face, one of the leaders, maybe 2. Side by side at a podium. Flags behind them. The setup screams historic. The body language says tense. Neither of them smiles. The statement they read is bland, precise, and meticulously translated. Phrases like mutual de-escalation, stabilizing framework, and non-aggression architecture fill the air like damp fog. It's not a peace treaty. It's not even a truce. It's a beginning, sort of. People in the cafe don't cheer. They don't clap. They just listen. Then they go back to their tea. Outside, a man leans against a light pole watching the same speech on his phone. His expression doesn't change until the very end when one of the leaders, just for a moment, stumbles over a word. The man smiles faintly. Good, he mutters. Still human. Historians still argue whether this press conference mattered. Some say it was the turning point. Others call it theater. But the real shift, if you look closely, happens in the people. At a small synagogue, the rabbi invites a Shia scholar to speak after prayer. Not about theology. About loss. They don't argue. They just name the dead. One by one. Silence after each name. A college professor in Isfahan rewrites his curriculum to include Israeli poets. A filmmaker in Jerusalem starts a documentary called Whispers Across the Sand, featuring voices from both sides, unfiltered. The funding is tight. The courage is tighter. Meanwhile, the algorithms shift. Social media trends start favoring olive branches over fire emojis. For once, hope isn't being drowned out. It's trending. In a refugee camp just past the former front line, a radio station is rebuilt. Not by an NGO. By kids. Teenagers with soldering guns and dreams. They call it Voice of the Quiet. They broadcast bedtime stories in both languages, static and all. You pause. You listen. One story tonight is about a lion and a jackal who argue for so long the sun forgets to rise. The punchline isn't funny, but the way it's told makes you smile anyway. Someone nearby hums along. The world hasn't changed overnight, but the pitch has softened. A former fighter stands on a rooftop holding a hammer instead of a rifle. He nails a frame into place, a window newly repaired. His hand shakes slightly and used to the stillness. But the nail goes in. Below, kids kick a ball. It's patched with tape. They cheer louder than a crowd ever did for a drone strike. The speech on TV ends. There's no applause. But in the cafe, a barista finally puts away the panic button beneath the counter. And that, you think, might mean more than any headline. Night returns differently now. Not with the shriek of sirens or the thunder of distant artillery, but with a kind of nervous quiet. It's the kind of stillness people used to pray for and now aren't sure how to live in. You lie on a thin mattress in a temporary shelter. It smells faintly of disinfectant and old canvas. Around you, dozens of others do the same, some on mats, some in folding cots, some just curled on bare floor. A few still sleep with shoes on. One man clutches a small radio to his chest. Static hums low, then a lullaby plays in Farsi. You don't know the words, but they soften the edges of the room. In the dark, someone snores. Another coughs. A woman whispers a prayer into her blanket. This isn't peace, not yet. But it's the closest anyone here has come in years. Outside, under the moonlight, two aid workers huddle over a clipboard. One wears a Red Cross vest. The other a headscarf and a patch that reads Relief Without Borders. They compare lists of food distribution, water tanks, shelter needs. No arguments. Just quiet math. Nearby, a dog barks at something in the dark. It echoes down a corridor of broken buildings. No one screams. No one runs. The bark is just a dog being a dog. Somewhere down the road, in a gutted school now converted into a field hospital, a nurse bandages the arm of a man who won't say which side he fought on. She doesn't ask. She just raps. Historians still argue whether this was truly post-war or just intermission, whether the absence of gunfire counted as peace. But in this moment, all that matters is the absence of screaming. You step outside. The night air is crisp, cooler than you remember. Stars, normally drowned by smoke and fire, prick the sky like old friends returned from exile. You spot Orion. Then the crescent moon. You wonder how long it's been since you looked up without bracing. From a rooftop, two boys flash a flashlight in rhythmic patterns across to another building. Morse code. Or maybe just play. Either way, it's communication that doesn't explode. You sit on a broken bench beside a man with silver in his beard and sadness in his spine. He offers you a piece of stale bread. You take it. He doesn't speak, but eventually he sighs. We buried 13, he says softly. Built 5 tents. One well. I think that's a good day. You nod. In Tel Aviv, someone lights a candle on a windowsill. Not for religious reasons, just because. It flickers against the glass like a heartbeat. In Shiraz, a father reads a story to his son by flashlight. The son interrupts constantly with questions. The father doesn't shush him. Down in Gaza, two boys draw chalk borders in the dirt, then stomp over them and laugh. You don't need a translator to understand what that means. Back at the shelter, the radio crackles again. This time it plays a slow, breathy saxophone piece. You don't know who the artist is. You don't care. It sounds like rain on a dry roof. Someone says goodnight in Hebrew. Another answers in Arabic. The lights dim. Not because of a blackout, but because it's time. You close your eyes. And for once, you're not afraid of what tomorrow sounds like. There's a sound you haven't heard in years, laughter. Real laughter, not nervous, not sarcastic, not brittle from the edge of despair. This one rings out from the corner of a square where a makeshift puppet show draws a curious crowd. You lean in with the others. A wooden camel with wobbly legs argues with a tiny general wearing a pot for helmet. The punchline, lost in the squeaky voice and exaggerated gestures, doesn't need translation. The whole square chuckles together. You feel your own face crease into something resembling joy. Nearby, a bakery opens its shutters for the first time since the ceasefire. The sign above it is scorched but still readable. Sweet peace, someone has graffitied beneath it. You line up with others, shoulder to shoulder, for bread. No one pushes. They wait. The man behind the counter kneads dough with hands that once loaded rifles. You can still see the calluses. But the way he folds the dough, delicate, rhythmic, it's like muscle memory from another life. He smiles shyly when a customer calls him chef. Not yet, he replies, but maybe again. Behind him, a boy sketches on the wall in charcoal, a sun rising behind crumbling towers. It's not perfect, but it's hopeful. The boy doesn't smile, but his hands move quickly, confidently. As if building something brick by Imagine Brick. Historians still argue whether art has a place in post-war recovery. Some call it a luxury. Others a necessity. But here, today, it's happening anyway. In a basement repurposed into a performance space, two actors rehearse a play called Sand Between Flags. One is Iranian, the other Israeli. Their accents are heavy. Their lines occasionally overlap. But the story, a mother searching for her son who no longer remembers which uniform he wore, is raw and real. They'll debut next week. To a small, cautious crowd. Or maybe just the press. Elsewhere, musicians gather in an abandoned mosque. Jews, Muslims, Christians, no one asks what songs are allowed. They pass instruments like shared secrets. A violin, a hand drum, a flute made from salvaged pipe. The melody they play is haunting, ancient, and unnamed. It weaves into the wind like smoke from incense. Passersby pause to listen, unsure whether to cry or dance. At a nearby university, classes resume. The lecture halls still smell of dust and ash, but students fill the seats. Philosophy, engineering, journalism, medicine, no one jokes about survival anymore. Now they argue about the future. Loudly, passionately. In one class, a professor draws a triangle on the board and says, "These are your three choices: revenge, forgetting, or transformation. Choose wisely." A student in the back mutters, "Can I circle back to revenge later?" The room laughs. Even the professor smiles. Back on the street, the puppet show ends. The crowd applauds. Children run forward to poke the camel to see if it's real. A woman hands the puppeteer a bag of figs. He bows deeply in return. You pass a bookstore whose windows were shattered last month. Now it's open, barely lit, selling poetry and history side by side. The first book you spot on the table, Letters Between Enemies. The author bio reads simply, 2 voices, 1 story. You leave a coin in the donation jar and take a copy. Outside, a mural is being painted. Not by professionals, by teenagers. They've scrawled half-formed messages beside dripping flowers and crooked doves. One phrase is bold, "We're not finished, but we're trying." You look up. A plane crosses the sky, civilian, not military. Its lights blink steadily. No one runs. No one hides. A vendor rolls past, selling roasted chestnuts. He hums a tune from the old days. Someone joins in. Another whistles along. It sounds like peace. Or maybe just the rehearsal. You follow the sound of hammering. It leads you down a narrow lane where sunlight filters between battered buildings, catching on nails, wood splinters, and the sweat-lined foreheads of people rebuilding their homes. Walls rise where craters used to be. Window frames stand upright like hope waiting to be installed. At the center of it all is a woman in a linen dress with sleeves rolled to her elbows. She's lifting bricks onto a wheelbarrow, her movements steady and practiced. Next to her, a teenager with headphones saws reclaimed wood into rough planks. His playlist bleeds faintly through the foam, something about beginning again. You watch them work for a while. They don't speak much, but everything they do is a kind of language. One of patience. Of defiance. Of moving forward, brick by stubborn brick. In the distance, the call to prayer drifts over rooftops, mingling with a synagogue bell. No sirens. No scrambling. Just sound and sky. At the community center. Half rebuilt, still missing a door, there's a clipboard with names. Not for drafting, but for shifts. Volunteers for cleanup, food distribution, translation, therapy. The most popular shift? Childcare. Inside, the laughter of children echoes off half-painted walls. They play tag around sandbags not yet removed, their voices bright and undeterred. One small girl wears a firefighter's helmet 5 sizes too big. She runs headfirst into the future, giggling. You lean against the wall and realize your hands are shaking. Not from fear. From the unfamiliar feeling of letting your guard down. Across town, in a modest library that somehow survived the shelling, a reading circle gathers. The book is The Little Prince, translated into both languages, read aloud line by line in alternating voices. An old man with a worn prayer shawl stumbles on a phrase and laughs. His neighbor, younger and wearing a keffiyeh, corrects him gently. They keep reading. Historians still argue whether these moments, volunteer rosters, shared story time, rebuilding matter in the long run. Whether they survive the next political shift. But the people in these scenes aren't waiting for history's verdict. They're already writing their own footnotes in concrete and crayon. On a rooftop garden, 2 old friends reunited after years of separation plant saplings together. One wipes his brow and says, "I still don't trust them." The other shrugs. Then plant twice as many trees. You'll need shade while you wait. That night, the lights come back on in one small neighborhood. Electricity, unreliable but real, buzzes back into existence. Cheering erupts. A generator is shut off for the first time in weeks. Someone blasts music from a speaker. Someone else yells, "Not that song." It doesn't matter. It's too loud, too joyful, too alive to stop. In a nearby apartment, a young couple boil water for tea. Their apartment has no glass in the windows, but they've hung curtains anyway. They sit on cushions and pour slowly, deliberately, as if to remind themselves that normal is a ritual, not a luxury. You sip your own cup on a doorstep nearby. It tastes earthy, slightly burnt, but it's hot. That's enough. Across the street, someone has hung a sign. "We are still here." And beside it, smaller. "Trying." A boy skateboards past the rubble, jumping over cracks like they're part of the game. An elderly man shouts at him to slow down. The boy salutes him dramatically. The man laughs. Somewhere, two former enemies cross paths at a supply depot. They don't speak. They nod. And that, for now, is more than enough. The checkpoint is still there. Concrete barriers. Metal detectors. Armed guards. But something's shifted. The tension that once crackled like static in the air has dulled. Like an old blade no one sharpens anymore. You walk up slowly. There's a line, but it moves. Not fast, but steadily. People shuffle forward with papers, crates of supplies, bags of clothes. One woman carries a small dog in a blanket. No one questions her. The soldier checking IDs is barely out of his teens. His uniform looks too big, like it belonged to someone who never came back. He glances at your documents, then looks at your face a moment too long. Not in suspicion, but weariness. Then he nods you through. That's new. Beyond the checkpoint lies a road known for ambushes. Now it's lined with merchant stalls, patchy umbrellas, lopsided tables, vendors selling everything from phone chargers to sun-dried tomatoes. One has a hand-painted sign that reads, "No politics, just prices." A little boy is selling candied almonds. His eyes are serious, his hands sticky. You buy a small paper cone. He grins like it's his first sale of the year. It probably is. Down the street, a building still scorched from the fighting has been turned into a workshop. Inside, 3D printers hum alongside the clink of old tools. Young engineers, half with buzz cuts, half in hijabs, are rebuilding prosthetics from scraps. A man with no legs smiles as he's fitted for a new one. He takes a few wobbly steps and then salutes the laughing technicians. "Now make one that runs," he jokes. "Only if you bring back medals," one of them says. Historians still argue whether these zones, once gray and militarized, can ever become permanent crossings or if this is just a lull. But to the people walking this road today, permanence isn't the point. The crossing exists. That's enough. You stop by a mural painted on a collapsed wall. It shows two children facing opposite directions, each holding a kite string that arcs into the sky and loops into the shape of a dove. Someone's written beneath it in small, careful letters. Borders are lines, but we are people. At a rooftop cafe, families gather beneath tarps that flap lazily in the breeze. The coffee is strong, the cups chipped. Conversations drift in and out of Hebrew, Farsi, Arabic, English. One man raises his cup to no one in particular and says, to the awkward quiet that came after. Everyone laughs. They know exactly what he means. In the corner, a journalist types on a dusty laptop. She's writing a piece titled "The Day Everything Didn't Explode." You read over her shoulder until she notices. She smiles, shrugs, and says it's a slow news day. Thank God. Further down, a soccer match erupts in a parking lot. Kids from both sides. The goals are backpacks, the referee is an ant with a whistle and no patience. There are arguments, of course. But no one storms off. No one brings up politics. Just offsides, fouls, and whose turn it is to be goalie. You sit on the hood of a car finishing your almonds. Behind you, someone begins playing an oud. The music rises above the shouting, the laughter, the honking. It threads the moment together like golden string. And for the first time in your life, you feel the difference between ceasefire and stillness. This is something more. Not peace, maybe, but the scaffolding of peace. Fragile. Human. Real. As the sun sets, lights flicker on and patch together strings, bulbs bought from 4 different countries, powered by 2 mismatched generators, blinking like fireflies above the market. You look up. And above the old checkpoint tower, someone has hung a banner that reads, "Welcome to the Maybe." The archive is quiet. Not silent like a grave, but quiet like a library of living ghosts. It sits in what used to be a courthouse. Marble cracked, ivy sneaking in through shattered panes, but still somehow dignified. Inside, people move with reverence, fingertips grazing old shelves, eyes scanning yellowed maps and fading photographs. You're here, like them, trying to remember, or maybe trying not to forget. On the 3rd floor, a woman sorts through a box marked simply "displaced." It's filled with documents, letters, family photos never mailed. One shows a little boy on a plastic tricycle with the words Tehran, 1995 scribbled on the back. She holds it for a long time before placing it in a plastic sleeve. Nearby, a digital station hums. Volunteers are scanning everything, converting a war's worth of memory into code and light. Each beep means another story saved from the rubble. One man scans an identity card from the early 80s. My father's, he explains, not looking up. He disappeared, but now he exists again, at least here. Historians still argue about what's worth preserving. Strategic maps? Battle footage? Treaties that lasted weeks? But this place thinks differently. Here, it's the human fragments that matter: shopping lists, baby shoes, someone's notebook of half-written poems in 2 languages. Downstairs, a group of teenagers watches an old black-and-white video, an Iranian teacher and an Israeli doctor laughing on a television panel in the 1970s. The teens whisper as if seeing aliens. They used to be friends? One asks. Not friends, another replies. Neighbors. You smile. It's a small correction. But it matters. In the corner of the archive, an artist sketches faces from passport photos onto massive scrolls. None of the eyes are finished. Still watching, she says when asked why. Still waiting. Across the city, similar archives are forming, not official ones, just rooms filled with memory. In Jerusalem, a tiny museum opens inside an old bakery showcasing wartime recipes adapted from ration packs. The most popular item? Flatbread with lentil paste. They call it Victory Pita. It tastes like endurance. Meanwhile, in a village once split by barricades, people host a day of what-ifs. They gather in the town square, placing empty chairs for those lost and those who fled. Each person brings something they would have shared if the war hadn't happened: music, food, jokes, regrets. One man plays an oud cover of a Hebrew lullaby. A woman tells a story about a wedding that never was. They pass tissues as often as they pass wine. You sit near a young man who reads aloud a letter he never sent to his brother. The brother fought for the other side. He finishes the letter, clears his throat, and simply says, "Anyway. I'm still here." Someone claps. Others join. It's not thunderous. But it's honest. A few days later, the archive uploads a new exhibit, The Sounds We Almost Lost. It's a collection of everyday audio, street vendors calling out, mothers scolding kids, children chanting school rhymes. One clip is labeled, Bus Stop Argument About Cats versus Dogs, 2022. You listen. You laugh. It's ridiculous. And it's perfect. Because this right here, this remembering, this rebuilding of the ordinary is how peace begins to breathe. Not in treaties, not in official stamps, but in stories. In the dust left behind by laughter and loss. And so, as you leave the archive, a small boy stops you at the gate. He holds up a drawing. It's crude, but clear. 2 stick figures shaking hands across a wall. He doesn't say anything. Just hands it to you, as if you'll know what to do with it. You fold it carefully and slip it into your pocket. Because some archives don't need shelves. Some just need someone to carry the memory forward. The delegation arrives without fanfare. No military parade, no throng of journalists, no sweeping orchestras to herald a new era. Just 2 black sedans and a modest bus, doors hissing open in front of a quiet government building that still smells faintly of concrete dust and burnt paper. You're there to watch. Not because you expect fireworks, but because this moment, as plain as it appears, might be the one that history remembers. A group of diplomats steps out, all in mismatched suits and traditional garb. Some wear keffiyehs, others skullcaps, a few just tired expressions and untucked shirts. One woman carries a thermos of tea like it's armor. You suspect it is. There's an awkward shuffle. A man from the Israeli side offers a handshake. His Iranian counterpart hesitates, then returns it briefly before adjusting his glasses like nothing happened. Small, but seismic. Inside, the meeting room is Spartan. Plastic chairs, water bottles with mismatched labels, a table repainted too many times. There are no flags, no slogans, just a single printed sign taped to the wall. Dialogue, no translation needed for respect. You hear the door click shut. Then silence. Outside, reporters sip lukewarm coffee, whispering into their mics. Closed-door negotiations, they say. Symbolic gestures. Some soundboard. Others sound cautiously hopeful, like meteorologists trying to predict peace-like weather. Meanwhile, the streets around the building remain strangely calm. Police presence is minimal. Protesters, if any, have stayed home. The city seems to be holding its breath, not out of fear this time, but disbelief. At a nearby falafel stand, a vendor watches the building while flipping pita. Maybe this time they're serious, he mutters. Or maybe they just got tired of funerals. A customer nods, chewing slowly. Same thing in the end. Historians still argue whether this was the first real step or just another photo op with no photographers. But something is happening inside those walls, something unscripted. 1 hour becomes 2. By the third, aides emerge. No shouting. No chaos. Just scribbled notes, a few nods, and a whispered they asked for more coffee. You grin. That's always a good sign. Elsewhere, the world watches without knowing what to make of it. Analysts tweet hot takes. Governments issue cautious statements. But the people, you notice, have stopped waiting for headlines. They're watching each other. In Tehran, a teacher draws a map of Israel on a chalkboard for the first time in 20 years. In Haifa, a cafe plays Persian jazz. No one complains. Children, born into sirens and slogans, ask what the word peace actually means. Parents stumble to explain. It's like quiet, one says. But on purpose. You walk past a group of university students scribbling graffiti in 3 languages. Peace talks louder than bombs. On a rooftop nearby, a group of poets holds a reading. They take turns reciting verses, fumbling through translations, laughing at mismatched idioms. One poem, read in both Hebrew and Farsi, ends like this. We tried silence, we tried fire. Now we try breath and bridge. It earns applause. Then a long pause. Not uncomfortable. Just full. Back inside the building, the delegation finally emerges. No press conference. No declarations. Just quiet handshakes and nods exchanged in the corridor. But one diplomat caught in the doorway turns and says it anyway. We're not finished. But we are speaking. And that might be the loudest sentence in years. The school opens with chalk dust and cautious optimism. You arrive just as the morning bell rings. A hollow clang from an old iron pipe hung in the courtyard. The building is a patchwork of paint layers and bullet-scarred brick. But the windows are clear. Clean. Someone cared enough to wipe the soot from the glass. Inside, a classroom smells of disinfectant, ink, and something floral. Maybe jasmine from the yard outside. Desks are mismatched, some carved with names, others rebuilt from crate wood. The teacher, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a bright tie, writes history and healing on the board. Today's topic, what happened and what we do next. He begins not with dates or treaties, but with a photograph. It's black and white, faded at the edges. 2 young boys, one in a school uniform, the other barefoot, stand arm in arm in a field of sunflowers. This was my father, he says, pointing, and this was his best friend, until the war told them otherwise. You can feel the students listening with that particular stillness that only comes when hearts are trying to open without cracking. In a nearby classroom, a different kind of history unfolds. A young woman leads a literature class where the students, Israeli, Iranian, Palestinian, Armenian, read poetry translated across 5 languages. They take turns mispronouncing each other's vowels. There's laughter. And when a girl stumbles over a particularly hard Hebrew phrase, her Iranian seatmate gently finishes the line. It's clumsy. Beautifully so. Down the hall, art class is chaos in the best sense, paints, charcoal, fabric scraps, glitter. One boy paints a tree growing out of a burn tank. Another draws 2 hands reaching for each other but never quite touching. That's what hope feels like, he says, without being asked. Historians still argue about education in post-conflict zones. Should it heal or should it remember? But these kids don't seem to think it's a choice. They're doing both. You peek into the staff room. It's half collapsed but functioning. Teachers sip tea from tin mugs, comparing lesson plans with wrinkled brows and hopeful smiles. One says, today, no one cried. The others nod like that's the best news they've heard all week. Outside, recess begins. Children flood the yard in bursts of movement and color. Soccer balls fly. Jump ropes slap the cracked pavement. Laughter echoes between buildings like songbirds returning after a long winter. You spot a game of tag where the chaser yells, your piece, instead of your it. The rules are unclear. The joy isn't. An older student plants a tiny flag in the center of the yard. It's hand-drawn, stitched from 2 torn shirts, one blue and white, the other green and red. A teacher tries to remove it, then stops. She leaves it fluttering in the breeze. Across the street, parents wait behind a rusted fence, watching. Some smile. Some cry. All of them stand a little straighter when the bell rings again and the children spill back inside, sun-soaked and unbroken. Later, the teacher reads a story about 2 rivers that hate each other until they realize they both flow into the same sea. A boy raises his hand. What if the sea dries up? The teacher pauses. Then answers. Then we dig a well together. That night, the chalkboard is wiped clean. But the chalk itself, the dust of it, still lingers in the air. You breathe it in as you leave, wondering how many kinds of lessons can live in that silence. The market reopens on a Sunday. No announcement, no ribbon cutting, just a creaking of awnings, the rustle of old tarps pulled back, and the slow return of smells you'd almost forgotten: roasted nuts, sweet citrus, grilled lamb, diesel, and dust. You stroll through the aisles like someone walking through a memory that isn't entirely theirs. Vendors call out in voices still hoarse from silence. Fresh olives, one shouts. Dates from the south, hollers another. One man holds up a bundle of mint and grins, for peace or tea or both. You smile, though the joke stings a little. Nothing is quite normal. But it's trying. At a stall stacked with second-hand books, a young girl reads aloud to her grandfather. He leans in close, not because he's hard of hearing, but because her voice is the kind of music you don't want to miss. The book is in Persian. The author was once banned. No one seems to care. 2 stalls over, a man and woman, one with a yarmulke, one in a chatter eye, haggle fiercely over the price of lemons. There's no yelling. Just firm voices, exaggerated sighs, and at the end, a shared laugh when the scale tips in favor of neither. They split the cost, then split a pomegranate. Historians still argue whether trade is the first step toward peace or its final symptom. Whether the smell of grilled fish between enemies counts as diplomacy. But if you asked anyone here, they'd say the answer is in the spices. Because spices never cared who bought them. Only that someone did. You stop at a booth selling hand-painted tiles. One reads in Hebrew, "This home welcomes strangers." Another, in Farsi, "Kindness is not weakness." You buy both, not knowing where you'll hang them, but certain they need to be somewhere. Toward the back of the market, a small crowd gathers around an elderly musician playing a ney. The flute's sound is soft and winding, like a river unsure of where it's headed but refusing to stop. A toddler dances in slow circles nearby, arms raised like wings. In the shadows, a man sketches the scene on the back of a receipt. When he catches you watching, he shrugs and says, "If I draw it, maybe it lasts longer." You nod. That feels true. Past the spice merchants, a young couple, newly engaged, judging by the garlands around their necks, walks hand in hand. The man carries a tiny plant in a ceramic pot. "It's olive," he tells a passing vendor. "For our balcony. If we ever get one." The vendor responds without irony, "Start with the plant. The balcony will come." Above it all, sunlight filters through patched fabric, casting colorful shapes on the ground. Children chase the light like butterflies. A woman hands out small cups of strong coffee to anyone who looks tired. And at the center of it all, the old market clock ticks again. Not quite on time, but ticking nonetheless. You pause beneath it, listening. Not to speeches, not to gunfire, not even to songs. But to something else. Something quiet. Consistent. The rhythm of return. A small boy tugs at your sleeve and offers you a plum. You take it. He runs off without a word. You bite in. It's sweet, tangy, and a little bruised. Like everything here. The cemetery is quiet until it isn't. At first, it's all stone and shadow. Weathered headstones lean at odd angles. Inscriptions faded from sand and time. Some are marked in Hebrew, others in Persian, Arabic, Armenian. No rows, no neat symmetry. Just memory, sprawled and unsorted. You pass by small offerings. Flowers, coins, folded notes tucked into cracks. A handful of pebbles rests on one grave. On another, a tiny flag flutters from a rusted button pinned into the earth. Then you hear it. Laughter. Not loud or careless. The gentle, private kind that bubbles up when grief meets memory in just the right proportion. You follow the sound and find 2 old men sitting on a bench between the graves. One wears a prayer shawl. The other a faded olive field jacket. They're drinking tea from paper cups, passing an ancient thermos back and forth. "She hated roses," says the man in the shawl, gesturing toward a fresh bouquet someone's left. "Always said they were too proud." The other chuckles. "She also hated your singing. She married me anyway. That part's still a mystery." You stay quiet, letting their stories unfold like a book that smells of both joy and war. They speak of wives, brothers, years in exile, years in service. They don't always agree on the details. They don't need to. One wipes his eyes and mutters, "We argued more than we agreed." The other replies, yeah, but we never stop talking. That feels like something sacred. A few rows away, a young woman kneels at a stone too new to weather. She traces the engraved name with her fingers. Then she opens a notebook and begins to read aloud. Poetry, her own. The verses are raw, uneven, and achingly brave. One line stays with you. If I forgive you, does the war still count? Historians still argue about memorials, what should be preserved, what erased. Whether remembering glorifies or cautions. But the people who come here aren't thinking in theory. They bring water for plants. They bring stories. They bring each other. A child runs between headstones, chased by a mother whispering hush in 3 languages. No one scolds them. Not here. Not today. You pause at a grave marked only by a stone and the word unknown. Someone has drawn a heart beside it in chalk. Rain will wash it away. But for now it holds. Near the exit you find a mural etched onto a crumbling wall, etched, not painted. As if the artist wanted the lines to last through fire and rain. It shows a tree with roots growing around helmets, rifles, boots. The branches bloom into books, olive branches, children's hands. At the base, a simple phrase. They were all someone. As you leave, the 2 old men finish their tea. One offers you a final word, we buried a lot of enemies here. And some friends we didn't understand in time. You nod. In the distance, a church bell rings. A muezzin begins the call to prayer. Somewhere else, someone strikes a match for a candle. It's not about forgetting. It never was. It's about remembering the right way. With space. With silence. With each other. The stage is set in an abandoned theater. Dust motes drift in the beams of morning light that sneak through cracked shutters. Rows of velvet seats, half-faded and threadbare, face a stage that once echoed with drama, dance, and declaration. Now it waits, quietly hopeful. You step inside as the company prepares. They're not professionals. Not even close. A poet, a mechanic, 2 high schoolers, a grandmother who once did lighting design for puppet shows. But they've come together to tell a story. Not of sides or battles, but of aftermath. Of stitching what was torn. Behind the curtain, costumes hang on a line, borrowed shawls, coats, traditional sashes, military jackets turned inside out. Symbols from every side deliberately scrambled. No villains this time, someone says. Only people. Rehearsal begins with silence. Then footsteps. Then a monologue delivered by a woman whose voice trembles as she speaks. Her character isn't named. She represents the mother who waited for a son who never came home, and the one who did changed beyond recognition. Her final line, when the war ended, I couldn't hear the birds anymore. Then one day I realized I'd stopped listening. It earns applause from a nearly empty room. The next scene is absurdist comedy, 2 border guards arguing over who owns a stray cat that keeps crossing the fence. The audience laughs. Maybe harder than they should. Because sometimes absurdity is the closest thing to honesty. Then comes a dance, 3 dancers moving in spirals. Their hands meet, break away, meet again. It's not about harmony. It's about trying. Historians still argue about the role of art after war. Is it indulgence? Distraction? Or resistance? But no one here is theorizing. They're busy building a set out of cardboard, hanging lights from extension cords, painting a backdrop of a field that never existed, but maybe could. You sneak backstage and see a table covered in props. One catches your eye, a small toy soldier with its gun melted away. In its place, a flower stem made from wire and tape. Someone's handwritten label reads, Scene 5, What We Could Have Chosen. That evening, they perform for a packed house. Families sit beside strangers. Children on laps. Veterans next to students. Some people cry. Some laugh. All of them stay until the end. The final scene shows 2 characters sitting in the dark, watching fireworks in the distance, not knowing if it's war again or celebration. One says, if it's peace, we'll dance. If it's not, we'll still dance. The curtain falls. Silence follows. Then applause. Not thunderous, but sustained. Like rain that won't stop. After the show, there's tea served in mismatched mugs and a wall covered in sticky notes. People write what they felt, what they remembered, what they didn't know they needed. One reads, I stopped hating for 2 hours. That's something. Another, I brought my father. He didn't leave early. That's something too. You step outside into the cool night. Someone has lit candles along the sidewalk. Dozens of small flames flickering beneath posters for next week's play. Borders. A love story. You realize they're not done. Not with the story. Not with each other. And neither are you. The radio show begins just after midnight. You're already half asleep, but something in the static catches your ear, a familiar voice, soft and unhurried, weaving its way through the quiet. It's called Voices After the Fire, and it's hosted by a former war correspondent turned late-night DJ. Tonight, she says, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about what people whisper when the headlines go quiet. The signal hums, then fades, then returns as if the airwaves themselves are exhaling. The first caller is a baker from the Negev. He shares a story about a boy who used to steal bread from his stall until the day he paid with 3 pebbles and a flour. I kept them, he says. They're still on my shelf. Next is a nurse in Tehran. She reads a recipe over the phone: chickpeas, garlic, lemon, tahini. This was my mother's hummus. She always said peace is something you have to mash slowly. A musician from Jerusalem sends in a voicemail. Just the sound of his oud, played gently in the dark. No words, just notes that seem to reach across miles of dust, anger, and time. Historians still argue whether these small transmissions matter. Whether voices carried by static and late-night airwaves can ever shift something as heavy as war. But to those listening now, it feels like they already are. You lie back, the sound of soft music and soft voices curling around you like steam from a late-night kettle. The DJ reads a final letter from a listener. A child, maybe 9 or 10. It says, "Dear radio, my grandpa said the war is over, but I still hear it in his sleep. Can you play something to help him dream better?" There's a long pause. Then the DJ says, "Yes, we all need better dreams." She plays a song you don't know. It's old, wordless, just a slow rise and fall of melody that feels like breathing. You close your eyes, and in that moment, fragile, unfinished, but real, peace doesn't feel like a monument or a headline. It feels like this. Like someone speaking gently in the dark and someone else listening. Like a lullaby hummed after a fire. Now the lights have dimmed and the city, whatever city you imagined, has curled into itself like a tired animal. The streets are quieter, the market empty, the tea cooling on the stove. Somewhere, a candle still flickers beside a photograph and someone is writing a letter they'll never send. Your breath slows. Your thoughts soften. And all the noise, the speeches, the bombs, the slogans, the grief fades behind you, replaced by something smaller. Something human. You remember the 2 children chasing kites. The old men in the cemetery. The chalk on the grave. The plum in your hand. You remember laughter and arguments that didn't end in ruin. You remember music. Food. A letter written by a child who just wants his grandfather to sleep without dreaming of sirens. And maybe, just maybe, you carry some of it now. Not as a burden, but as a thread in a tapestry that's still being woven. Not by generals or presidents, but by shopkeepers and students and artists and aunties who just want the kids to stop yelling and eat already. Let that thread rest with you tonight. Let it wrap around your breath. Let it hum in your bones. And if your dreams drift back into war, remind them that we told a different story just now. A story that didn't need to end in fire. So rest. And remember, when the dust settles, the seeds begin.